All right, people, it's finally time to talk about Ashes of Creation. I've avoided talking about this game for the longest time because it was in the blue sky phase where they just talk about things and everything is speculative and conceptual. But finally, Ashes of Creation is starting to show off some relatively finalized systems, and I'm someone that doesn't care about your game until you prove to me that it will feel right. Stephen Sharif, the CEO of Intrepid, the guy that's started the whole thing, MMO Jesus, whatever you want to call him, came into my Crowfall streams routinely, like came in like 4 or 5 times into my Crowfall streams and was asking me like what I liked about the game, the pitfalls of the game. Was in my streams for like hours. So who doesn't like that? I very much appreciate that he took my feedback, even though I didn't give a fuck about his game. I was rooting for him. I told him that in the chat. I told him that I'm rooting for you, but. Man, I just have a hard time caring about games in that highly conceptual state. But, buddy, I gotta tell you, they have really started to nail the feel of the game in the most recent previews. Perfect example being the Mage livestream. When they were showing off the Mage and the way that he ran around the world and casted spells and just, I don't know, existed in the Ashes of Creation world, it felt right. And if they don't nail the feel for me, then I don't really care about any of your other systems. You could have the coolest node system with all of the coolest economic things, and it could be great. But I don't care unless combat in your game is good and like running around in your game is good. And that's a very difficult thing to do. I understand that. This has been the eternal problem of MMOs for the longest time, even for high-budget games. Anybody that played Star Wars: The Old Republic and World of Warcraft will tell you, for whatever reason, moving around in Star Wars: The Old Republic felt worse than World of Warcraft did. Exact same style of combat, but for whatever reason, Star Wars: The Old Republic felt worse. Certain games just feel better than others. So the fact that I could see on this live stream that everything appeared to look right. When I watched the Warrior tanking live stream, it just felt right. The Ranger felt right. The Mage in particular really felt Mage-like. I'm really liking the overall direction of the combat. I know there are a lot of action combat Andes out there that are all about combat that is similar to WildStar or BDO or Crowfall or whatever, where everything's sort of free action. I'm here to tell you, as somebody that's played these action MMOs at a high level, particularly like WildStar, I loved WildStar combat. Trust me, I loved it. I played the dog shit out of WildStar. But there are a lot of downsides to action telegraphed combat, particularly when it comes to scale. It's great that those systems are fantastic at small scale. When it's you fighting AI, it works. Or if it's you and a couple buddies fighting AI, it works. But when it's a big raid, or if it's even a mid-size PvP conflict, all of those telegraphs and AoEs and everything being an AoE just starts to really fall apart, particularly when it comes to healing. When it comes to healing, everything is an AoE heal. And that leads to some serious design problems. A perfect example being New World. Healing in New World is crazy. The targeting in New World, where you have to heal a specific target, good luck. You have to use this weird scroll wheel thing. Maybe they've improved it since I've played, but it's clearly very janky. Targeting specific people is weird. You run into these weird situations where clumping up is like now a strategy because you can't get focus fired if everybody's clumped up, so you just sort of deathball Zerg, so everybody's sort of like in the way, and it's just this swarm. It gets really messy really quickly. And in my opinion, the action combat itself never really added that much skill. I played WildStar at a very high level, and in my opinion, like there was never much skill in hitting your abilities or hitting your shots. It just wasn't that much of a skill thing, in my opinion. It didn't really add much, but there was a lot taken away with the janky clusterfuck nature. Same goes for Crowfall. Hitting skills in Crowfall wasn't really hard for the most part. I mean, maybe there's some melee spacing arguments to be made, but for the most part, Crowfall could have been a tab target game, and it would have been really similar to what we got. Same thing with WildStar. It could have been entirely tab target, and it would have been a similar-ish experience. And when it comes to performance, Ashes of Creation is looking to be a larger scale game. all of these action combat things are much harder on the server. You can effectively cheat when it comes to server side things a lot easier when it's tab target and they're like very easy, server checks. I'm not going to get into the technical things, but tab target just scales at a much better level. And in my opinion, MMO combat just works better with tab target. Yes, it's a give and take. Sure, I love, BDO where you're like 1v1ing a PvE mob, you're doing all this cool stuff, and you feel like a superhero. That feels great. But again, it doesn't scale. Everything's a clusterfuck AoE in mid-size combat, much less large-size combat. So in my opinion, the tab target model with some skill shots thrown in there is the superior model. I think World of Warcraft has sort of nailed it over the last 15 years, where they've just slowly incorporated things like, Shockwave and Bladestorm and, Frozen Orb, whatever. WoW has like some skill shots in there. Frost Trap, that's a notorious one. But also largely tab target. I think that's, in my opinion, the way to go. Now let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what I'm seeing in Ashes of Creation thus far. First up being the look. They recently updated to Unreal Engine 5, and it looks great. I can't be much of a hater here. I do wish the game was a more stylized art style. I really like World of Warcraft, WildStar, Guild Wars 2. I like that more cartoonish art style compared to the more realistic art, but it looks pretty damn good. It's the best looking MMO I've seen. And the thing with game engines anymore, particularly with them being on Unreal, is that you're not really locked in like you used to be back in the day, where this is the engine and it's very hard to upgrade it. Even WoW, which was in an entirely different era, you can upgrade the models. So if the game is successful, this is not really a huge problem. But I got to say right out the gate, game looks pretty good. The game also appears to be running decently well, at least from the vertical slice previews that we've been seeing. Now, I know that they are likely playing in a more optimized environment for these showcases than the overall game itself. Yes, these showcases are made to show off the game in the best light. I get that. But from what we've seen with 4K footage, high-res models and gameplay and fighting seems to be running decently. And from what I've heard from the people that have played the other testing, the game runs pretty damn good. So that's nice. Another thing I like is that there's no race and class locking. This is cool because you can be every single race with every single class. Now, I can't give this game an A+ when it comes to the races. I think it suffers from a lot of the problems that MMO races have, which is everything is a different flavor of human. The only game that I've played recently that has not been the case for is Crowfall, where Crowfall had like centaurs and guinea pigs and humans and elves and all of these minotaurs and all these crazy races, which is cool. But another thing that Ashes of Creation has that I like is that all of the armor is wearable and shareable between all of the races. So the reason why you have all of that and all of that stuff can be shared and all the classes and races can be shared is because all of those animations are going to be the same, because everything is effectively a humanoid. So in my opinion, that's a good trade. I don't think the juice was worth the squeeze of Crowfall having these really wild and wacky races, because it made the armor customization and the class animation so difficult that it's just not worth it. But I do like that. The biggest thing I'm liking so far has got to be the class system. Now, I know many of you are going to scream about balance. We'll get to that in a second. But I really, really like that this game appears to have a high degree of class customization, build customization. People are going to be running some wacky and wild things. And just like Crowfall, there's going to be times where you think something is garbage. Like, dude, no one plays the Blackguard or the Slayer Duelist in Crowfall. For the longest time, everybody thought it was bad, and turns out it was not. There are going to be weird, wacky combinations that everyone sleeps on, and then one guy will do this thing, and everybody's going to be like, oh my god, he just opened up Pandora's box. That will absolutely happen. So I really enjoy that. And also, to address the balance, Ashes of Creation appears to have a lot of different scales of PvP, which in my opinion will make the balance easier. Yes, there are absolutely going to be classes that suck in large scale or suck in small scale, but Ashes of Creation appears to have small scale arenas and then the large scale PvP with some open world PvP. So yes, your thing might suck for this thing, but it's probably not going to be bad for everything. In addition, this game is a PvP game. In terms of like player performance, you're largely going to be judged for player performance in a PvP context, which is much more dynamic. There is much more, many more variables that can make certain things viable that would not have been viable in a PvE context. World of Warcraft is a very difficult game to balance because you have scripted PvE, where if your class is 5% less DPS than the other class, it's very obvious, and the best choice is incredibly obvious. Whereas with Ashes being a sandbox PvE, PvP game, these decisions are much harder to make because there's so many more variables. So that's what I'll say in argument of balance, is that it's not going to be quite as difficult as a traditional theme park because it's just going to be hard to extrapolate value out of the classes. Next thing I like about the game is the node system. Now, I like the node system for an entirely different reason than most people. I personally don't care about leveling up a node and making my hometown cool and customizing it with my group of people, little Farmville. I don't care about that at all, but I do like the player behavior that's going to come out of nodes. I like that people are going to have some attachment. I like that it's going to add some stakes to PvP. I like that the servers are going to be different. Personally, I'm just looking for a game where I can PvP with the boys and have a good time. I don't really care about housing or that kind of stuff. I'll do it. I'll appreciate it. I'll have fun with it, but that's not like why I play games. So, but I do like the player behavior that's going to emerge. I like that there's stakes and consequences, and people will get upset, and there will be Jimmy's rustled, and there will be, people really happy, and there's going to be scandals with this shit, which is great because there just hasn't been a game like that in a while where somebody really does some scandalous shit. And I think, similar to EVE Online, that Ashes of Creation is going to have these moments and these really villain characters that MMOs thrive on, in my opinion. Whether you hate him or love him, the guy that wiped that Nax raid in hardcore, it's compelling. It's compelling to see, there will be an absolutely tyrannical mayor. There will be a guild of dickheads that does dickhead shit. And it's just going to be possible in this game. The next thing I like is that this is very obviously a PvP game. Now, some of you are going to say, no, Ashes of Creation is a PvX Sandpark MMO. Yes, there will be PvE activities for people to do. I'm sure that a lot of the activities you do in Ashes of Creation will be PvX Sandpark things. But at the end of the day, the most consequential gameplay is going to come down to PvP. The server-defining things will be PvP. Even the things that aren't PvP will be PvP. The economy will be PvP. The elections essentially are going to be PvP. There's going to be people upset, no matter what. There are going to be a lot of people upset. There are going to be a lot of people that are happy, which is great because it's more engaging. The stories that the players create in this drama will be better than any sort of scripted PvE story. It's going to be great, which is a double-edged sword, which we'll get to into the bad section of the video. But yes, I am really liking that. Next up, we have personal player prestige, which is something that hasn't existed in MMOs for a very long time, at least not the more mainstream ones. For the most part, there aren't these legendary characters on a server anymore. That hasn't existed in a very long time, and I miss that. In classic World of Warcraft, there were notable players. You would go into Stormwind or Orgrimmar or Ironforge and see these people with this gear, with the epic mount, with whatever it was that you looked up at, and it was cool. To this day, core memory burned in my brain. I remember being like 13 years old and seeing a Gnome Warrior with a full Dreadnought set of gear. And I was like, damn, that's a bad motherfucker. That doesn't exist in MMOs anymore. It just doesn't. Because there's not any sort of personal player prestige. There aren't these legendary, figures that have things that nobody else has. But in Ashes, there's going to be people that own the settlements, or have the thing, or are flying and no one else can fly. I like that. I like that they're going to a system like that where there are haves and have-nots, because honestly, when everybody has everything and everybody's just this different color of gray in this huge mud puddle, it's just not interesting. The next thing I like is the business model. It is a $15 a month game with paid cosmetics. There is no box price. You pay $15, you can play the game, and Steven Sharif seems to be very, very much against the idea of pay for advantage. I'm not even going to say pay to win because everybody's against pay to win, but he has specifically said he is against pay for advantage, meaning like anything you can pay for that gives you like bank space. Like, yes, it's not like pay to win in like a combat sense. It doesn't make you stronger, but it does make you better. And he has like very specifically said he is against anything like that, any sort of pay for advantage of any kind. Honestly, probably because he was an Arcade player, and that game was just ruined by that. And it's kind of this Pandora's box of once you open that up a little bit, it's hard to get that back in the box. So I genuinely believe that he is going to launch the game without any sort of shit like that. In terms of believing promises, this will be the promise that I choose to believe, just because he's seen and personally played games that have kind of been hosed by that. But what about the FOMO cosmetics? Yes, I'll admit I am not a huge fan of cosmetics being sold on a store, especially with MMOs, because progression for a lot of people is about the cosmetics. It's about looking cool. That's a serious thing for a lot of people. They really care about that. And when you have people just, swiping their credit card to look cool, or somebody looks cooler than you because they swipe their credit card, it does muddy the water a bit. But we need to be realistic about how expensive these games are to run. And quite frankly, $15 is not enough for a sub fee anymore. And it's going to be difficult to get people to pay more than $15 because $15 is kind of the benchmark price. That's what World of Warcraft does. But the reason why World of Warcraft has started monetizing in all these other different ways is because $15 is not enough. For a $15 a month MMO to still exist, like World of Warcraft did in 2004, it would need to be $25 a month in today's money. That's just how the inflation works. Not even talking about that games are more expensive to make now, but just pure inflation. It would have to be $25 a month. Now, I personally don't think that the game would do well if the sub fee was $25 a month. Would I pay it? Absolutely. I'm somebody that would pay like $50 a month. If the game was good, I'd pay it. I love the sub fee model. I think it's the best model in terms of giving the developers the correct incentive structure to make the right to make the right decisions for the game. I think the sub fee is the most pure form of monetization where it keeps the train going in the direction it should be. But this is the world we live in, and there's a lot of competition out there for gaming, particularly competition that's free. So charging more than World of Warcraft, in my opinion, is almost a death sentence. And I can kind of be okay with the cosmetics, especially considering that all of those cosmetic models, the models themselves, not the colors, will be obtainable in the game. I think they've said that. And those cosmetics will also be used for NPC customization. So the world, the characters in the world will have that stuff. So I can, pinch my nose on that one. And now on to the bad. Now, all of these things I have no concrete evidence of, so I really wouldn't put too much weight into them. But one thing I've noticed is that, at least from my gut feeling, it appears that all of the developer showcases have been vertical slices, meaning that they are showing a very highly polished demo of whatever they're showing off. If they're showing off the Highwayman Hills, it's like the best part of it. It's I don't know. I just get that gut feeling that they're only showing the absolute best things, because you really don't see like anything that's like extremely rough around the edges relative to where they are in development. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong about this, and like a lot more of the game is as good as in the same sort of fidelity as the stuff they've shown on stream, then wow, holy shit. But I just have a strong feeling that what we're seeing very much is very much a demo. Again, really hope to be wrong. Another thing that, again, just a gut feeling is that I'm not getting a Star Citizen feeling from this game. Like the game is going to come out. I genuinely think this game is going to come out, honestly, a lot sooner than people think. We still got a ways to go, but I'm not one of these people that's like, the game is years and years away. No, I think it's going to come out a whole lot sooner than you think. But I do get some Star Citizen vibes with like, why are they iterating on this like really unimportant minor thing? Like sometimes they will talk about like again, attention to detail. It's great. I totally understand it. It looks cool when you see like these hyper detailed things that really don't matter. But also, God, the game's kind of taking a while to come out, man. And you see like this hyper detailed like leaf falling from the sky. It's like, well, like somebody really put a lot of time into that, but this other thing is not that great. So it just makes me wonder a little bit. So I'm getting some Star Citizen vibes in that regard. But again, if they pull it off and they really just have this kind of attention to detail and they largely nail the important things, then great, fantastic. Now on to the downright ugly. The worst thing about Ashes of Creation is that I like it. Every MMO I like dies, whether it's Crowfall or WildStar. If I like it, it dies. And Ashes of Creation seemingly is turning into a game that I like. Now, what do these games have in common? The number one thing that both of those games have in common is that they are very difficult for time-constrained players to enjoy. If you are a casual gamer that is not super committed to the game, it's very difficult to have fun in a game like Crowfall or WildStar. If you're just kind of a civilian, just somebody that's kind of in the background, just want to be a part of it, it's difficult. These games take a level of, I don't even want to say time commitment, but almost like brain commitment. Like you need to really sink your fingers into these games to appreciate and enjoy them. And a lot of people just want a game where they can hop on and have some fun. And honestly, having fun in a game like Crowfall is hard because you really need to commit and you really need to, sink your teeth into it. You can't. Crowfall was never a game where you can just hop on with your buddies and have a good time. Neither was WildStar. These are games that you really need to be invested in them to appreciate and enjoy them. And I have a feeling that Ashes of Creation is going to be in a similar boat. And that's, in my opinion, the thing they need to work on the most is, can a player that is a casual player still be invested and care about what's happening? Do you care? If you're just somebody that hops on every now and then and just runs around, can you still have fun? Or is it very much an all or none thing where you need to be, having these 2 to 3 hour play windows or be part of a guild that's, got a mission? Like, can you just hop on by yourself and have some compelling things to do in the game? Can you? So if you can't, Ash of Creation, Intrepid Studios, that is your number one thing. That is more important than, honestly, everything else, because there are a lot of players that are not going to be in the guilds with the social connections, with the time and the commitment levels of your fans. Your fans do. Your fans will be building the nodes and doing the PvP, and they're going to get in all the drama. But little, Bob in accounting with his family who plays for, maybe an hour, hour and a half on a good day after work, does he care? Does he still want to be a part of it? Hope so. You need a lot of him. You need a lot of Bobs. The next huge problem with Ashes of Creation is that it's a server-based game, which is great because you're going to have server communities, and every server is going to have their own unique node structure and their own little story and community. It's going to be cool. That's great. But what happens when a server dies? It doesn't matter how popular the game is. Even World of Warcraft, at its peak, in Wrath of the Lich King, where it had like 13 million players, still had dead servers. And that is going to be a big problem in Ashes of Creation. When your server dies, it's going to be painful because your progression, your guild's progression, and your almost entire sense of being is largely tied to your server. Not exclusively, but man, when your server dies in this game, it's going to be brutal. So they need to have some sort of contingency for when that happens. I'm not going to even say if, because servers are going to die in this game. It's just going to happen where, a streamer server, for example, let's say a big summit. Let's say Summit 1G is playing on the whatever server, and all of his fans are on that server, and it's a high pop server, so people are avoiding it because they don't want to queue or whatever it is. And then Summit just loses interest in the game, and so do all his fans, and now that server's dead. Like that's a realistic thing that's just gonna happen. Now are all those people that are still playing the game, they're just like fucked, and they're on this dead server that nobody wants to be on because it's dead. What are they gonna do? How are they gonna merge those servers? You can't seamlessly merge servers like you can with like a World of Warcraft style game because you have nodes and you have node progression, and maybe those guys built a really cool blacksmith, but that blacksmith doesn't exist on another server. So it's tough. Like that's going to be a serious thing, and I do wonder how they're going to address it. The next thing that's ugly about Ashes of Creation is the entire core concept of the game. Steven Sharif is always talking about Ashes of Creation is fundamentally about risk versus reward. And man, does that scare me. I am somebody that played Crowfall, a PvP game. And what I learned from Crowfall is that, man, people are pussies. Holy cow. People will do something in a safe zone that takes 10 times as long. Even if they were to get ganked every 10 minutes, it would still be stupid to do it in a safe zone. But they will do something 10 to 20 times less efficient just so they don't have a chance of being killed. People will play the game in the most unfun way possible to avoid losing anything. And it goes back to that human psychology where losing $5 is way more painful than finding $15. And there are a lot of gamers, I almost want to say the majority of them, that will play the game in the most pussy way possible if you let them. If you can escort things without a caravan, they will do it. Will it take 20 times as long? Probably, but they'll still do it. And so many people will do it that it will just kill caravans. I promise you. So you are going to have to force risk. You're gonna have to force it, meaning that this material flat out cannot be carried to another node. It just can't be carried or teleported. It has to, 100% has to be caravaned. Same thing with resources. If you want to add high risk resources, they need to be exclusive. Exclusive, meaning you can't get them slower in the PvE zone. You can't get them slower in a safe way. You can't get them at all. You have to go out to the sea, for example, to get whatever it is. Like, if you want high risk things, they have to exclusively be high risk. Seriously. I promise you that people will do outrageous things to avoid conflict, or even the idea of conflict, because that's what I learned from Crowfall, is that you could farm in a lot of these more, risky areas and get away with it 90% of the times, but people still wouldn't do it because there's a chance they could get killed and waste 10 minutes of time. It's crazy. So you got to force it. One thing I love about Ashes of Creation is that they are making a commitment to not do instancing. They want the dungeons to be open world, the world bosses to be open world. They don't want people sitting in capital cities, queuing up for things and teleporting to dungeons. They want people out and about in the world, traveling, exploring. They want you to see other players and be out in the world doing things. That's great. I love that. I really do appreciate that, but it also scares the fuck out of me. Because how are you going to deal with node sieges where it's hyper? I mean, and trust me, it's going to be crazy the amount of people that are going to show up to these node sieges. I know they're aiming for 250 versus 250 as a performance goal for them, but first of all, I don't think they're going to pull that off. That's a lot. That is a lot happening. But let's say they do pull it off and 250 v 250 works. People are going to bring 300, 350, 500, dude. It's going to be endless. They are not going to be able to keep up with the amount of people that are going to show up to these large-scale things. A lot of the content in the game is going to be cheesable by just bringing a ton of people. And I honestly think that the game's just going to fall over when it comes to node sieges unless some degree of soft instancing is implemented. Maybe the person declaring a siege on the node has to run through a bubble force field, and maybe that's temporarily instanced to limit it to where it can only be 250 v 250. It's just going to be tough. It's going to be really tough to pull that off from a technical perspective, but also thinking about some of the more open world objectives. I just have a hard time seeing how they're not going to get zerged. I don't know. I have a hard time seeing how some degree of soft instancing is not going to be necessary. But we will see. We'll see, but this is something that scares the hell out of me. And the final ugly thing is that there is such a thing as the game being tested too much. If the alphas and the betas go for too long, then the game will largely be solved and people are going to get burned out on it, and there's not going to be that same level of intrigue and magic at the release. And I've seen this happen with, Crowfall in particular, but a lot of MMOs where they have really long testing phases. And by the time the game comes out, it's almost oh, I guess it's out now, but I've been playing it for a year, 2 years, whatever, and the game is largely solved, and the people that have been beta testing it have just this massive advantage, and it discourages all the people that didn't do that. So I think there is such a thing as game being tested too much. Honestly, I genuinely believe that Intrepid is aware of this. Hell, I think Steven, even in my live stream when he was talking to me, asked, like, I specifically said that. So I think that they know that too much testing is genuinely like problematic. And I'm somebody that thinks that Alpha 2 is not going to be that long. I don't think we're going to have an Alpha 2 that goes for over a year. Honestly, I don't even think it's going to be a year. I think that by the time we get Alpha 2, release is going to be relatively soon. I think it's going to be a decent testing phase, but I don't think they're just going to let us have this game to play for like a year and to beat our heads against it for a year. Maybe I'm wrong, but if I was them, I would not give players full-blown access. Maybe have some spot testing, some very hyper-focused testing with like pre-made characters and whatever, to get the testing and the whatever analytics you need. But just giving people full-blown access for like a year or 2 years, some people really think that. I don't think it's going to happen. I hope not, because I think that's going to be a big issue if it does. But I would like to see the release of the game have some mystery to it and not be entirely solved. Yes, people will solve the game a lot in alpha and beta. I'm in a guild right now, and of course, when they get alpha 2, we're all going to be doing the numbers and figuring out the classes. And yes, you can't stop it. But man, if you have a long time to do that, man, it does sort of put a huge damper on the launch. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly with Ashes of Creation. Obviously, was very critical about a lot of things in this video, but I am hopeful that this game will release. I do think this game will come out. I am wishing them all the luck in the world. I did buy a package. I do have Alpha 2 access, so when that gets going, I'll be in the game and I'll be making videos. There's going to be no NDA, but I will be critical, as always, and I wish them all the best. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.